to Conversations with History. My name is Greg Norman. We're lucky enough to have with us today the second inductee of the Michigan High School Lacrosse Coaches Association, the second for this year, 2023. That is the Birmingham Brother Rice head coach, Ajay Chawla, who is one of the best coaches in the state, certainly has proven himself in the 10 years he's been at Brother Rice, a Troy resident. And first of all, I just wanted to extend from the board what a congratulatory handshake, and what a terrific opportunity. And we appreciate you participating, and congratulations.
Thanks. And thanks to the board. It's a great honor, and excited to be a part of Michigan Hall of Fame for lacrosse.
One of the questions that we always ask, Brian Kamiskas, who's the head of the Hall of Fame, makes that phone call. Now, Brian's also a Brother Rice graduate, so it's kind of nice getting a call from what goes through your mind when you get that phone call from Brian.
Well, it's funny. Brian runs these tournaments, so when he called, I thought he was going to beat me up to put a team in the jingle or whatever the Christmas one is he does. So I've known Brian. Brian and I played together at Brother Rice. So Brian was a year older than me at Brother Rice. So I've known him for a long time, and it was great. It was great to get the call. He told me, I'd been up for it a couple times, and this was the year I got it, and happy to hear from Brian, obviously being a Brother Rice grad, a fellow member of the Hall of Fame. And, I think it's an exciting accolade to have. So it was great. I was joking with Brian a little bit and said I was expecting you to show up at my door, or, like somewhere like the NFL Hall of Fame does, but I'll take a phone call, Yeah.
Except if we had jackets, they'd have to be something other than mustard yellow,
Yes,
exactly. If you remember back, those were the old original days of ESPN jackets, and those were ugly then, and they're just as ugly now. So we'd have to change something.
Well, for sure.
The statistical part of it is you're 12th all time on the list. You are the second coach, I believe, in Brother Rice history, behind Rob Ambrose. You're the only other serving coach that's been there. You've been there 10 years. You've won 8 state championships in that time frame, if I'm not mistaken.
8 state championships, yep.
Which is a pretty good record. At 162 and I think 33 at 12th place, I think you've got about an 85% or an 82% winning percentage. I'm not a math guy, but it's in that ballpark.
Seems about right, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, an amazing. We're going to talk a little bit about Bryce, but I want to kind of take you back to the beginning. You're from Troy originally, and obviously ended up at Brother Rice. When was the first time that lacrosse crossed your landscape?
Actually had a neighbor of mine, or a kid who lived across the street, Steve Decker. He was playing lacrosse. I was in 5th grade, and he was on the St. Hugo team, and I went to St. Hugo as well. So he was on the team. He was playing, and I picked up a stick with him and fell in love with the game. I carpooled with Stephen Morrow, who's David's brother. So there was that pedigree too. And Kevin Morrow was my coach. So he not only drove me to school some days, but also was my coach at Hugo, and actually one of the defensive assistants at Brother Rice while I was there as well. So really fell in love with the game at Hugo. And back when I played, and I guess it would have been 87, 88, 86, 87, 88 at Hugo. We were one of the only middle school programs around. I mean, it was like us, Country Day, Cranbrook. There weren't many. Sorrows, I think, had a team at that point. So it was really, it just was a sport that I excelled at early, and I just fell in love with it. And did the whole, went to camps, and when I went to camps, they were camps. They weren't. I don't think a kid these days knows what an actual lacrosse camp is. We went to camp to learn, not to get recruited. Right. Even when we were in 5th grade, we went to camp to learn. It seems like nowadays it's all recruiting camps, but that's where I started. And then played at Hugo, and then played at Rice under 2 or 3 different coaches.
When you start out with the program, you pick the stick up. How do you determine in your mind? You remember back how they put you at whatever you played defense, obviously, as high school and into college. But did you ever have any other thoughts of why did you end up as a defenseman? I guess is the easiest question.
Well, I think at that time in the game, and in Michigan especially, if you were big and slow, they put you at defense. And I was bigger, and I was probably a little faster, but not as fast as some of the other guys. So
Right.
I think I ended up at defense and never stopped. I mean, that's where I think Mr. Morrow handed me a defensive stick. Actually, to go back, it was probably my neighbor, Steve Decker, who played defense. And I started playing with the defensive stick, and then we just kept it that way. But that was the way of the world back then. It was if you had some size and, they put you at defense, and it kind of stuck for me.
I grew up as a goalie in hockey, and of course, the fat kid in the neighborhood in the second grade became the goalie.
Right?
What they never realized is that you spent all the time on the ice, and by the time you got to be 14, you had twice the ice time that everybody else had, and you grew out of the role. You outgrew the roly poly, and you ended up not being in right field. And it was like, wow, it was fine at 14. It was pretty tough when you're 10, 11, and 12 because you're still the roly poly kid. So I can certainly understand that.
Yeah.
From your experiences at Rice, you played for a number of, this was Flux before Rob got there. So you played for who at Rice?
So when I came in the door, Rometty was a coach, and I believe he followed Hebert. He took over in 90 and was there for 90, 91. In 92, we had a guy named Graham Honaker, not Graham Honaker, that's his son, but God, I can't remember his name. Coach Honaker. He came in for 2 years, and he coached me my junior, senior year. And Kevin Morrow was his assistant those 2 years. So, and then the year after I left, there was another guy named Clark who came in for 1 year and then really took the program into the dumps. And then Rob came back, which was, so we had literally in a course of like 5 years, we had 3 different coaches. And then Rob came back and coached into, I took over in 13.
Okay. So you play at Rice. You ended up going to West Virginia to play collegiately.
Northern Virginia. Right outside of DC at Marymount University.
Was it because of lacrosse or because of the education?
It was lacrosse. I got recruited there, really fell in love with the area. My uncle lived out in Northern Virginia, so it was kind of a place where I felt like I could go out of state, but still have some family around and be comfortable, and was really looking for a college that was, located kind of in a city, and DC and Georgetown's a great spot to be at when you're in college. So fell in love with the area. Really, the coach Dave Webster, now who's at Dickinson, was a great coach and kind of lured me out there, and really enjoyed the time I was there.
What was your degree in?
Biology.
So what did a 20-year-old defenseman think at the time that he was going to do for a career at that point? Teach?
A 20-year-old defenseman thought he was going to go to med school.
Okay.
Which is why you pick biology. Otherwise, I don't know why you torture yourself with that that curriculum. But my junior/senior year, had the hard conversation with my dad, who's a doctor, that wasn't the route I wanted to take, and so I went and got a minor in marketing after I got home at Wayne State, and kind of went from there. So never went into the biology field, but been in technology kind of my whole life after college.
And you own your own technology company now?
Yep, a partner of a technology business, and we do services and resell a number of hardware and software products.
If Dad is a doctor, how'd that conversation go?
Better than you would have thought.
Okay.
Being a doctor and of Indian descent, I think he was hoping that the last of his 3 kids would carry on the tradition. Didn't happen, but he was kind of gave me the talk of, if you don't love it, don't put yourself through it. Right? It's not something you want to do. The laboring of going through med school and residency and all the work you have to put into where you get to, you're making some money and doing some things. It's a labor of love. And if the love's not there, don't do it. And I've kind of taken that forward in my career and my passion for coaching,
When you come out of college, there's at that point there was really no MLL. There was no, obviously there's no PLL, but there was a lot of very very quality club teams. We've had the opportunity to talk to the Jesse Hubbards and the Mark Millens, some of those guys that were playing for great club teams. Was lacrosse at that point in the back of your head a potential of making a little bit of money on the side, or was that just not even on the landscape?
Never.
Okay.
The only way I could make money in lacrosse was, hanging out with my good buddy Dave Morrow and trying to sell sticks at a camp.
Okay.
That was kind of the only way I saw it, and making a couple dollars coaching.
Right.
Really, I fell in love with coaching early, and I think I attribute that the majority of that to my college coach. Really had a lot of admiration for him and the way he handled the boys, and taught us and really took a overall approach to coaching more than just on the field. He was a big off the field guy, a big in the classroom guy, and I knew I wanted to coach it some way somehow, and kind of got an opportunity right after college to start part-time coaching, so worked out well.
It's an interesting question because you played, obviously, for a college coach you loved. You were at Rice at a time when it really wasn't necessarily the Rice way, because they'd had the changeover, I would think. So I'm guessing a lot of your pedigree, the way you think about things, comes from your college coach, which is pretty amazing.
Yeah, I would say so. I mean, obviously having exposure to Coach Fracassa at Rice was awesome.
Sure.
But not in the lacrosse community. And then, the coaches were good. I mean, they were good coaches at Rice. I respected them.
Yeah.
But my college coach really had a lot of impact on, me wanting to become a coach, and just like I said, how he dealt with the players and everything he did on and off the field to, and as a young guy, 18 years old, you're going off to college, and, most of these guys weren't from Northern Virginia. So to make it, feel like a good place where they wanted to be and where they would excel both on and off the field, I think was a big deal for me. And to this day, I talk to him all the time. I've gone out there multiple times to go over game planning, practice planning, what he thinks. We talk about, hey, I've got this type of a makeup on offense, whether it be heavy midi, heavy attack. What are you seeing out there? What can we do to be a better team? What kind of plays you running on man up? I mean, we still talk all the time, and it's been incredibly helpful.
If you've been at it a while, you build a family tree, don't you? You really do.
Yeah, you really do.
That's part of that. I still get literally every month, I get somebody asking for a recommendation from some kid who played for me 5 years ago, or, you end up at a wedding, or it's just all those things. If you're at this, it's rewarding when you see them at 25 and 30, because you realize
for sure
you've had certainly some impact. Now, your first coaching job is at Country Day. So obviously you come back from Northern Virginia back to the Detroit area. And your first assistant job or your head job? It was
assistant job.
Okay. What did you coach?
I coached at Detroit Country Day. I coached the defense.
Okay.
I coached with a guy named Dan Wood, and the other assistant coach was Dan Soper, and we had a good time. And we coached for 2 years. We were a real good team. Those were the years where Brother Rice was fairly dominant under Rob, and actually those were the couple of years that Seaholm had a really dominant program with Zonky and Werder and all those guys back in the late 90s. So it was super competitive out here, and Country Day was a great place to coach. Dan McLean was the AD back then and gave us a shot, and we had 2 really good seasons there, and so that was great. That was a great start for me, and I was able to bring some guys in that had later on gone to coach at Rice as well. So kind of start that whole family tree of coaching there.
Must be interesting going down the street from, wearing orange and black to be at Country Day. If there's a rivalry, that's one of the best that's certainly one of the best in the state, to say the least.
Yeah, it was. And Dan was a Brother Rice guy. So that helped a little bit. But yeah, it was always tough going against your alma mater and coaching against them. But they got the best of us both years. But we had two really good teams and sent some guys to Division I off those teams. So it was good to coach them and had a lot of fun doing that.
If I'm not mistaken, from Country Day out to California, Northern California.
Yeah. I moved out to California in '99 and coached Marin Catholic out in California for the year and a half I was there. Really took that program kind of up a level. Northern California lacrosse back in those days was probably 7 to 10 years behind where Michigan lacrosse was.
Okay.
I'd say it was more like when I played at Michigan, as far as number of schools, access to talent, as far as coaching. Although it seems as though that California's coaches, California has been able to grab a little bit more of that coaching talent just because of the location, right? You get a lot of guys that played out east that went and worked in the tech industry or moved out to California just for lifestyle purposes and ended up coaching. So I think they kind of leapfrogged us from a coaching talent and just ability to get those guys who were coming out of college and had played college ball to come out and coach. So I was there for a year and a half. Really enjoyed it, and then moved to San Diego for 6 months and didn't do anything but work. And it took 6 months off coaching, and then came back here and started at Brother Rice again in 2002.
California's interesting. I lived in San Diego for 15 years and coached. And, the funny part was you go to a football game, there'd be 600-700 people. You go to a volleyball game, and for a boys volleyball game, there'd be 1,000. And so a lot of the regionalism in those areas is that the athletes didn't always want to have to, bang heads and foot. They have great football programs. Don't misunderstand the point.
Right.
But they have other athletes matriculate to other sports and sometimes primarily. If you look at San Diego and if you look at Orange County, especially San Diego, they've done the last 15 years. Torrey Pines is certainly a national brand at this point.
Great school, great program. Yep.
With a good feeder program. So it's, you look at it and you think of Minneapolis, you think of Denver, you think of some of those places, Texas, places where you wouldn't so you came home from the sunny skies of Southern California, ended up back on, I'm assuming Rob's staff, Rob Ambrose.
Yeah, it was interesting. Two of the guys that I brought on in year two, or actually one I brought on the first year to coach our goalies, Matt Riker, and then another buddy of mine, Tim Nelson, who we started kind of part-time coaching with us at Country Day. And actually, now that I think about the third guy, Chris Feldman, they were all coaching the JV over at Brother Rice when I came back, and they had asked me to come on board and help them out, and I did. And Tim moved up to the varsity, replacing Mike Kennedy at that point.
Yep.
As Rob's assistant, and then a couple years later, Chris Feldman moved up to the varsity, replacing Tim, who moved out west, and so that's how that went. And I coached the JV for a couple years, and then we kind of realigned ourselves. And Rob and I had a meeting, and we talked about the fact that we hadn't lost a JV game in like 6 years in the state or in the Midwest, and we tried to play some varsity, low level varsity teams, and we were getting the quote unquote Heisman. They didn't want to play us, and understandably so. It was a little bit of a lose-lose situation, right? They're playing a JV team. They beat them, but if they lost, it would be a much bigger deal for a varsity team to lose to a JV team. Right. And that's when we went and petitioned the state to do a varsity B program. Obviously not allowed to compete in the state tournament, but gave us that, varsity name that then we could go get some varsity teams on our schedule. So started that team in, I want to say it was like 08 or 09, and coached that team, was the head coach of that team till 13 when I took over the varsity A program at Brother Rice.
What'd you learn from Rob as a coach?
That's an interesting question.
The loaded question.
I learned a lot. Rob's a great coach. He's a fierce competitor. as anybody who went against him knew.
Yes.
He was very structured in his approach to practices and game planning. I learned that. I think he had a toughness about him with the guys that I respected. We have definitely a different coaching style as far as how we go about it, but there how to build a culture. I mean, Rob built a culture at our school that wasn't easy to do. Right, came in when we were kind of going into the dumps and restructured things, and he did what he had to do to make it his way or the highway at first. And he cut a bunch of guys right off the bat that were starters the year before because they weren't gonna walk to the beat of his drum, and that kind of set the stage of what Brother Rice Lacrosse was going to be for the next 20-25 years. And we thank him for that. I mean, he did the hard things that I didn't have to do because they were already done for us. But Rob was a great coach. He was great in game. So I learned a lot of things about it, how to handle in game, whether it was personality changes or positional changes. So there's a lot that I learned from Rob, and Rob and I definitely butted heads on a number of things throughout the years. So much so that when he called me and told me that he thought that I should be the one to take the job over, there was a little bit of surprise, that because we had talked every year. Rob was joking about how, he wasn't going to accept my resignation. Every year I said, Rob, I think I'm going to resign at the end of the year. And he'd say, you can resign, but it's not accepted, right? We need you to stick around. And even though we butted heads and on who should be brought up and who should be playing and what we should be running, at the end of the day, I think we had a great relationship that led to, me taking over and him really helping and assisting in that process was great. Tell you the funny thing about Rob is, maybe not after every game, but after every Midwest game that we were out of town and most games in town, whether we lost by 15 or we won by 15, coaches would get together over an adult beverage and he'd pull out the napkin or the sheet of paper that was folded in his pocket, and we would go through every player at exhaustion. Well, do you think this guy should start next game? I don't know. I don't know if he did enough. Maybe this guy's better. And I would say probably 80% of the time or 90% of the time, the same guys would play every game. But we'd go through them and they'd get scrutinized every game amongst the coaches. And it was great because even though I was on the varsity B or the JV level, he really did take everybody's input into effect. And it was a coaching team decision with him on certain things. What did you see that I didn't see? And I think that I've brought that into play too with my coaching nowadays. I really rely on my assistant coaches big time, and my varsity B and JV coaches. I mean, one of the things we've been lucky to have is a lot of continuity in our staff, right? Like that's one thing that I think has contributed all the way back to Rob days of really our success, right? We didn't have a rotating coaching, carousel every year of different JV coaches, different VB coaches. The culture was the culture, and the guys that coached with us stayed for a long time. And the guys who took over for those guys had been in the ranks and understood what we were trying to get done and still do today. So long-winded answer of what I learned from Rob, but I guess the short answer is a lot.
I don't think people, unless you're inside the locker room, understand continuity and how that it plays as part of not only the way you operate, but the culture in which you operate. Sure. I think that's something that's, it takes a while. And once they figure out it makes the process easier. You took over in 2013. Were you aware in 11 and 12 that you were sort of being groomed for that position? No, actually, it was a surprise to everyone when Rob stepped down. It was a decision he made with his family. He didn't even, I mean,
at the banquet, we had no clue. It was probably a couple weeks after the banquet where he called me to tell me that was happening. And Chris Feldman, who was his longtime assistant, had just had twins, and was like, I don't know if I'm up for the job. And, I obviously had just had a baby as well. And it was a conversation I had to have, but it was something that I was passionate about, and was looking to go to the next level. And so, when Rob called and talked to me, I was surprised. Maybe not surprised that he thought I was the right one for the job, but surprised that, he had left. I mean, that was a big deal. And there were a lot of questions on why he left. And at the end of the day, they, as a family, they wanted to move to New York, and his business was kind of trending that way. And so he took the opportunity to leave. I always joke he left after, Sergio's senior year. So he went out on a high note with that team. That was great. But we had some good talent. And let me tell you, it wasn't easy year one. I mean, there were a lot of families and individuals that felt slighted that Rob left their kid, and, they didn't get to play their senior year for Rob. And so there was a lot of winning people over from that standpoint, which I think I did by the end of the year. A lot of them had played for me as JV players, but there was something special, and a lot of them were guys that family members had played for Rob, and they wanted to play for Rob. So it was a tough transition from that standpoint. I will say one other thing I'll credit Rob with is when Rob left, and he and I had a conversation after I got the job, and it was announced, and he said, listen, for your sake and for the content, for you to take over, I have to step completely away from the program, to the point where a lot of people were pissed, but he didn't really return a lot of people's phone calls. He kind of said, hey, Ajay's your head coach. I'm not going to intervene. He never, coached from the outside. He wasn't one of those guys who was like second guessing decisions I made. He was always very supportive and positive, which was awesome. Not that we didn't talk, we talked all the time, and Rob's still a very close friend of mine to this day, but and checks in, and and we talk, but he made it easier by doing that. And it was something I'll always be appreciative of.
Your dad would have told you that's a gentleman.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? I think there's a certain fact to that. Unless you've played against him and understand the premise of what he does and how he does. When I went to St. Mary's, I wanted to get into the Midwest, and we were really interested in doing that. And he opened a lot of doors. We never kind of filtered it through, but he knew that there was at least somebody else in the Catholic League that wanted to improve everybody and do those things.
Right.
I think that's, and I couldn't have asked from I always used to joke I was the dumbest coach in the league. I was a pretty good coach, but when you compare everybody else in the league that was coaching at the time, there were some pretty damn good coaches. So I think that's
right.
That's part of it. You mentioned that you kind of felt comfortable by the end of the year. Was there ever a point when you knew that, okay, this is no longer Rob Ambrose's program, it's mine, and now let's get on with it? And I say that on this also premise, there's still the right way. You still got to win every game. You still got to win state championships. And that's also part of the pressure, which to me has to be much greater pressure than worrying about whether or not you're following in the footsteps of a legend.
Right. Yeah. And I think, look, it's never easy to take over for a legend, right? I mean, ask the countless, the couple coaches that tried to have taken over for Rob or for Coach Fracassa, right? And not that they're in the same league, but they both won a ton, right? And they established a culture. And I think there was a point probably mid-season where, I thought I won the team's approval, right, from those guys that said, hey, this guy do it, right? Like, they'd all played for me before, so it wasn't so much the relationship standpoint, more than it was just, hey, does this guy know what he's doing on the field? And lucky enough, I was able to snag Mark Hamilton, who played for me in high school, and then came back and started coaching with me from day one as my defensive coordinator. And I grabbed Matt Riker, who coached with me back in the day at Country Day, and that was our first staff. And I think we won a lot of hearts that year. But look, nobody wanted to see Rice fall down. Not Rob, not the parents, not the kids. So it was a tremendous amount of pressure. And, I decided, that year that I was going to do it my way and not Rob's way. And, just had a different style of coaching. We were going to keep the culture because that was very important to me. And Rob will tell you, we all built that culture together. That wasn't just a Rob culture, right? That was the whole staff and how it worked out. And, Rob was at the helm, but we built it together, and we've maintained that culture. It's that dedication, hard work, attention to detail at practice, and hard work on and off the field, both in the classroom, out of the classroom, being a good citizen. All those things contribute to being a great lacrosse team, right? And we've continued to be able to do that, and it showed in our team GPA and showed on the field. And I think I've done a fairly good job of earning the respect of most of the guys who have played for me. As as a coach, you're not going to be 100%. Right. There's always going to be somebody who felt slighted, but we've done a very good job, and I've been able to hire and maintain a great roster of assistant coaches with Hamilton's still with me today, and Nick Garippa's been here for 6 years, and Paul Cosgrove, who was another great mind, with me for 6 years, and Luke Timmis, who played for me, Charlie Hennigan. These guys have all been part of the program for a lot of years, and the great thing is they all played the college lacrosse and all came back with a different type of a deal. So it's been great, and to be completely honest, Greg, I those assistant coaches on my varsity, Mark and Nick and Kaz, they handle the majority of the coaching, what you would call day-to-day coaching, as far as defensive coordinator, offensive coordinator. I took more of a football head coach role, where I'm in-game coaching, timeouts, personnel, things like that, handling personalities. But from a day-to-day, who's running the offense, who's running the defense, certainly not me. I manage the coaches and they manage the team from that standpoint.
As a defenseman, do you more have a jaundiced eye towards the defensive side than the offensive side? Has that always been, or have you floated, or have you been more offensive minded? Because who better to figure out an offense than a defenseman who understands how to stop it?
Right. So my first 2 years, it was just Mark and I coached the offense, and Mark coached the defense.
Okay.
So I've almost, since I left Country Day, have been an offensive coach. And I had that same thought process, like, who knows how to beat a defenseman better than a defenseman, right?
Right.
I can figure it out. I like the offensive side of the ball, and like I said, I tend to, in practice, I tend to spend more time down at that side of the field. Right. It's probably a little more exciting. There's a lot more to it. And Mark Hamilton does an unbelievable job with our defense. So, it's funny. I watch these guys coach, and at some point, it's kind of like the student now, becomes the teacher, because these guys are so in tune with all the new stuff going on, and all that kind of stuff. And really, that's where I've been, right? And being able to not have to worry about the X's and O's on offense or defense, and being able to worry about player personalities and how to motivate each kid to get the best out of them, and how to make sure that in game we're doing the right things and we're making the right adjustments and getting the right calls at the right time. That's what I can concentrate on, and so I'm not just watching one side of the field. I'm really concentrating on, the overall, overall process of the game and how we win. And that's been my focus for the last 10 years and is my focus again this year.
Of all the quarterbacks that are now coaches or analysts, because who spends more time in a film room than a quarterback? Certainly more than offensive linemen, And so if you look at really great coaches, they all had some hand in being a quarterback at some point. And I think there's a certain truth to that. I don't think that's a secret by any stretch of the imagination. I just have to touch briefly on, you lose to CC and you've lost to Heartland out of those 10 years. Is that a pressure reliever in that you understand the sport's getting better, we've got better teams, we're coming around? Or does it, and it certainly drives the bus that you want to get back to, but do those losses help a program like yours at that point with that kind of longevity and that kind of success, or is it just another game?
Yeah, no, look, I mean, I've had this conversation multiple times with multiple people, Rob being one of them. The kids are getting more talented in this area, right? And you go to Heartland and Brighton and all these places on the west, and then out west on the west side of the state as well. The youth programs are growing. You're getting more and more kids playing the sport. You have better teams. You have more kids playing club ball. So when you look at, Rice losing to Heartland and CC, I mean, obviously you never want to lose, right? But it is, I mean, the sport's getting bigger, it's getting better. There are better coaches coming into the league that, understand the game, which I think has been and continues to be a huge deterrent to these other teams not getting there. I think coaching is key, right? I mean, unfortunately, you still have pockets where they're youth programs, but they're majority dad ball youth programs, right? So you're getting a lot of bad habits early, and you don't have the programs that are starting to build now. But look, Heartland and CC are great programs, and we lost by 1 in both of those games, and the 1 in overtime, and so those losses suck, but they definitely helped our team. I think the following year we came back stronger. There was I'll tell you, especially after CC loss in 18, in 19, there was a focus that I hadn't seen in years and years, right? I mean, the kids the next day started concentrating on what we had to do, and it really produced a set of great leaders. And so again, I mean, Heartland, CC, I think Brighton has had some really good teams, and there are other programs out there that are getting better every day. Lake Orion gets better, Clarkston gets better, but I think, Greg, in order for the sport to elevate, I think teams have to get comfortable playing better competition and losing. And when you play teams that come in the playoffs and they've got 19 wins on the books, and then they lose by 25 or 20 goals or 18 goals or 16 goals. I mean, that just to me says, hey, are we playing the best competition we could? Are we really striving to get those games? And, I mean, sometimes it's a knock on us. We play 9 games out of state because we're allowed to play 9 games out of state. But I'll tell you what, when we get to the state playoffs, that's a big difference for us.
It is.
Right? We're used to being in tight games. We could play 18 games in Michigan and we wouldn't have the competition, and we got to the state playoffs and we might not be as comfortable getting down a goal or being up a goal or being up 2 goals in those tight games. But because our guys are used to those games, it's a big difference maker. And so, I don't know what it is. And I know this year, just because of the way the Catholic League kind of straightened out, and we have these Toledo teams that are now counted as out of school games, and it maybe hurts our schedule as far as strength of schedule for the first couple of years. Hopefully Toledo will get a little better in their programs and grow a little bit. But we're picking up 2 more in-state games, and we offered them out there to teams, and it's funny that not a lot of people decided they wanted to take us up on a game. So, I think the competition is getting better. I like what I'm seeing. I just wish everybody tried to elevate their game a little bit more, right? Who else can we play in the regular season? Who else can we get to? And I know, Greg, at the programs you've been at, you've strived to play some of the best, even if it means taking an L, right?
Yes.
And we, up until we couldn't anymore, we played Culver every year.
Yep.
And we got spanked most of the years. But it made us better. And so I think, growing the sport is good with the number of teams like we have. Now I think the concentration of us as coaches in the league has to be, how do we take those teams and get them to the next level, right? Like, we shouldn't have the crazy difference in the top 8 to 10 and the rest of the 150.
Well, I also
right?
I also think there's a realization that 5 years ago we had 139 teams. We now have 179. But 5 years ago we had 3 or 4 unifications. We now have 36. And if you look at pure numbers, we're 800 kids down from where we were. A lot of it based on the pandemic, not kids coming back. The fact is, there's less kids playing. And if you look at the national numbers from USA Lacrosse, we're not growing like we were, and neither is any sport. The pandemic had a great, consequential effect on all kids coming back to any number of sports. They're staying home.
Right.
I understand that, but part of that is, at least with the unifications, we're trying to get more schools involved, and maybe that's part of that, part of that discussion.
Yeah, no, for sure. And I think part of it also has to be, hey, we've put out some excellent players out of the state of Michigan, right? We need guys to come back and get involved. Coach, give back a little bit of something that, we gave to you.
Right.
And that's throughout the state. I think those kinds of guys, even if it's 2 nights a week working at the local youth program or whatever it is, giving some time back is going to be a huge help to all of us as we go and we move from the daddy ball to actual coaches.
We started doing middle school coaches with our high school kids and then paid them. At Oxford, we're doing it now at Fenton because, as you say, daddy ball, at least the high school kids were being coached 2 hours before they went to take their junior high job. At least they had some concept of how to teach language and terminology and shooting. And I think that's part of it. But you make a really interesting point about competition. I know when I went to St. Mary's, we engaged in X and, in Nutria and Loyola and Swickley. We tried to play those teams as quick as we could because it was the only way we were going to be able to compete with guys like you. And that was part of that premise. And, it does matter. I think that's an important part. Last couple questions.
Yeah.
You got a great talk a little bit about 24.
We got an interesting team coming back in 24. We've got 4 really, really strong middies coming back as seniors. So that's a tremendous help. So we lost some really, really good players in 23. I mean, hard to replace a Hunter Palenke, or Ben Eck or Sam Klein, who were just absolute motors. But we've got some younger guys that are going to fill some key positions for us. Hanson Palenke is one of them. Theo Lai is another that, have been in the system on our team, really playing secondary roles, but now we're going to ask them to step up and be leaders. And those guys are juniors, but we've got, between Cash Papadelis and Johnny Coons and Caden Ramos and Alec Notchik and Biglin. I mean, we've got some really good players coming back on the offensive side of the ball. And then defensively is probably where we're going to take our biggest hit. We lost 2 starters in Frick and McMichael last year, and we lost our goalie who was really good, Sims. So, we're starting a new goalie, and we have 1 returning defenseman who is very good, Lindsay. So he'll have to shoulder a lot of weight. He'll be playing the best guy on the opposite team. And then we have our face-off midi, this Danny Holt's going to be a junior. He was awesome last year for us. Probably, I don't know. I mean, in the state championship, crushed on face-offs against the CC. Face-off guy who was really good, and he had a great year last year, and he's very, very good. And we got Zawida coming back on our long pole defenseman. So we got guys coming back like every year. The question will be leadership. We need some of these guys to step up and be leaders. A lot of it will have to do with how they work on their own, or, in the weight room and in the off season. I mean, that's a big part of our program too. And hopefully a couple of them are stepping up as leaders in the weight room. So, we'll see. I mean, it's going to be an interesting year. I know CC's returning a lot of good players. They graduated some really good guys, and Heartland's the same. I mean, it's kind of, those two other schools, and Brighton has some guys coming back, and everybody's got guys, right? And we never know until the season shakes out. And I know the Catholic League will be hopefully a little tougher than it's been. It's kind of taken a little bit of a dive the last couple of years, and I'm hoping these new Toledo teams will be good, and that'll help elevate the Catholic League. I mean, when you were there, I think our Catholic League was pretty strong. I mean, UAD was doing pretty well, and you guys stepped up, and CC was good, and we were good, and De La Salle has taken a little bit of a dive, and they've had some coaching kind of carousel going on over there, and it's hard, and so is UAD, and it takes a while to rebuild the program, right? And but I think overall we'll be pretty good, Greg. I think in the state we'll be pretty good. I don't know where we'll fare in the Midwest, and we're playing a lot less games in the Midwest this year, so we'll know a little bit, but not as much.
Last question. Tell us something that we might not know about you, even those closest to you. Is there anything? I was in a lot of the interviews with. Tell us a little bit about you that we might not know. Again, it's not an easy question, but I'm curious.
Yeah. I mean, a lot of it you probably do know. I'm a fierce competitor. I think the one thing that guys outside the locker room might not see, or people outside the locker room, is, I have a real passion for developing these young guys. I put a lot of time and energy into these guys, both in and out of the season. You can see me in the counselor's office or talking to counselors about grades. I have a very open line of communication with parents. A lot of people think Brother Rice, Rob had kind of the NPP, the no parent policy, right. Where I have a very different approach to it. The only rule we have at Brother Rice as far as parents talking to me is, if you're going to come talk to me about your son, he better be there. Because if he's not there, I'm not going to discuss anything with you, because he knows why he's not playing. I have a very open relationship with all my guys. If you're not playing, the reason.
Right.
And if you forgot how to tell your parents why, then I'll tell them in front of you. But the 10 years I've been here, I've had one parent come with their kid, and their kid remarkably remembered why he wasn't playing in front of me that day. And that was the last question. But I think it's a passion for, the kids on the team, the program itself. I care a lot about it. I invest a lot of time and energy into the program. And having a full-time job outside of Brother Rice lacrosse is sometimes hard to manage, and a family, and but I think it wouldn't be the same if I didn't have a family who bought into it, right, and was supportive. And that's not easy to do either, right? I'm gone for 3 hours every day after work, right? And it's something that doesn't produce a lot, right? Maybe one day, Greg, we'll get to the Texas or Virginia or Culver way where they're paying their coaches $200,000, and we don't have to have another their high school coach is a lot of money. We don't have to have another way to support ourselves. But that's something, that a lot of guys don't see when they see me out there, and they look at, they may see me as the yelling guy on the sideline, but I really do. You have a great relationship with players and their parents, and like you said at the beginning, there's nothing like getting a call from an ex-player or a parent, player asking you for a reference for his job or advice on a marriage or things like that, and being invited to players' weddings. And I think I'm now getting close to coaching. Next year, I'll coach one of my ex-players' kids. So I'm getting old, I guess. That's what it's telling me.
Well, I'm still doing
it's exciting.
I'm 6 months from 70 and I'm still coaching. So I get that premise. And
you got some years on me, but I don't know if I'll make it that long.
Well, I didn't think I was going to either, but I now start to appreciate Paterno and some of the guys that, for the 85 cents an hour that you're getting for whatever you're making at the end of it, I don't think anybody realizes how much you don't make. And,
right.
Yesterday we have a bunch of JV kids playing in the All-American League, and I just go up and sit in the balcony so none of the coaches in the building. And then they come up and talk to you afterwards. The Lions are on. I should be home watching the Lions, but you take the hour, 20 minutes on the street. So we all do what we do. Listen, I want to congratulate you on a great career and what will continue to be a great career and all that you brought to lacrosse.
Thank you.
And I think with the numbers at the rate you're looking, I don't think it's going to be too much longer. You're going to be at the top of that list as the all-time winner, bypassing a lot of really good coaches. And you've meant a lot to lacrosse, and that's, I think, one of the reasons that you've been honored as the Michigan High School Lacrosse Coaches Association Hall of Fame for 2000. Thank you for all that you've done, and congratulations.
Thanks for the time, Greg.